Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing the film Eileen. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Eileen.
A woman's friendship with a new coworker at the prison facility where she works takes a sinister turn.
All right. And in Movies and Us tradition, we will start off with our one-sentence summaries of choice for Eileen. Sarah, what was yours?
Mine is, Massachusetts is a hard place to live.
Yes. There's a really great line in there at one point where she's like, it's Massachusetts. Everyone is angry all the time.
Right?
That's so...
It's like, oh, wow. That really help explain some things to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
It
was also like, yeah, let's not visit Massachusetts at Christmas time. Let's just steer clear.
Yeah, 1964, Massachusetts. Yeah, it's like cold and gray and everyone is upset. Sounds like the Northeast in the winter to me.
Perfect. Nailed it.
My one-sentence summary is that awkward moment when the cigarette is a more interesting movie character than the actual ones.
Ooh, okay. I love it. I love a good, spicy one-sentence summary.
You know, it has more character development that happens for that specific object. So we will dive in and share our high-level thoughts of Eileen to start off, and we will not spoil the movie in this first section. So, Sarah, I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts about Eileen. Did Eileen work for you?
This is another one of those movies that I wanted to like and couldn't. I think that there's a lot of good elements to this. I think, you know, the choice of setting and some of the cinematography choices, I think the score is very effective. I think both of the leads give good performances. And I think that there's some good elements of these characters in here. I just don't know that the movie actually capitalizes on them. So I left the theater just wondering, why did I just watch this? Like, what was the point of this movie? I don't understand. And so, like, while I had a fine time watching this, like I was engaged enough, it just didn't come together in the end for me enough to make this a movie that I really enjoyed. It was okay, which is kind of a bummer.
I had a similar thought leaving the theater. I was just thinking to myself, I think I'm going to forget this movie very quickly. And this is going to be one of those that we're like scrolling on our feed, looking at what we reviewed over the year. And I'm going to be like, what was Eileen about? We watched Eileen. I forget this entire movie. It's unfortunately pretty forgettable. I actually almost think that like the bad movies that are truly bad and we have a whole like unpacking of why it didn't work is honestly more exciting. There's just like it was underwhelming, I think is the kind of primary adjective that I would describe my experience with this movie. And I had a lot of like reflection afterwards to think about like, is it because, you know, our expectation of thrillers and mystery are just so much bigger now because they are, you know, we're used to thrillers and mysteries that are like over the top and there's lots of twists and turns and they're highly like well constructed. And that is how much we've done with this genre up until this point. And that's kind of a thought train that I went down that I would love to unpack a little bit more. But there's something that's kind of understated about this that I do appreciate. The fact that this movie got made, honestly, is amazing to me. It's a very like lean, an hour 38-minute runtime movie, which is so rare to see these days. And it's kind of a shame because I feel like this movie felt like an incomplete meal to me. And I don't know if more runtime would have helped it, but there's definitely a lot that left me wanting more from these characters. They were tropey and archetypes that we've seen a ton before and we see now again, but there's nothing that's like really new and interesting that I think this movie is trying to communicate. And then the plot itself, honestly, I thought would reach a higher fever pitch, and it kind of doesn't either. um my one overarching working theory that I'm standing on right now is that I think that this story probably works really well as a novel, and it just didn't translate well to the Brit screen. And in reading a little bit more about like the people that have read the book and are discussing this movie, I think that there's more that the novel leans into that I think the movie just does a like mediocre job of translating that. And I think that's what is unique about the story that the movie just doesn't know how to translate to the big screen. And I think that's what's missing. That's like the really like interesting nuanced aspects of the story that we just unfortunately just didn't get translated over. So I fixated on the cigarettes and how they were used for the entire movie, and that's where I like sunk my teeth into for most of this movie, because I just didn't find that much else that really interesting about this movie, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I have the same theory that this would
Perfect.
work really really well as a novel,
Yeah.
but just didn't work quite right as a movie.
Mhm.
I appreciate what they were trying to do. I don't know. I've been trying to figure out why this movie didn't quite work for me, and I haven't been able to fully figure it out. But I like what you said about it almost feeling incomplete, and that's definitely how I felt. So even though there is some sort of a resolution at the end, I I I think I wanted a little bit more. I think I almost wanted that really climactic moment to happen maybe a little bit earlier, so then we see maybe a little bit more of the fallout. Then that maybe could have led to a better resolution. I don't know. Or like you said, maybe if the characters had gone anywhere, maybe
Yeah.
that would have helped some. But I have a feeling that those things are in the book that just aren't present in the movie, and that's a shame. And this is one of those, I love a 90-minute movie. Ugh, yes, I want that all day every day. But I think that this maybe could have benefited from being a little bit longer, like maybe like 10 to 15 more minutes, maybe could have helped this really stick the landing and, I don't know, wrap this up in a way that's a little bit more satisfying, because it's not a satisfying ending, which is
Mm-mm.
it's a shame.
Yeah, not at all. And part of it is just I think the plot itself, again, I think it's thrilling in a novel format where you're building up and hyping
Hmm.
up to something and there's all these big reveals that you are imagining in your mind. But I don't know, like I think the average moviegoer's expectation of a thriller we've just been scaled up, unfortunately. And something that is more understated and subtle and less flashy like this movie, I think, needs to do something different to get us to experience that same like adrenaline rush. And I think that the missing piece that they could have capitalized on more is really rooting into these characters. Like this movie doesn't do that for me. And um so much from what I've read about the novel is about obsession and the way that um Eileen is just, pining after Rebecca and um, putting her on a pedestal, and the mystery and curiosity that she has for this woman who is so much the opposite of who she is and so much what she aspires to be. She exhibits power and charisma, and there's a sharpness to her that she also just like is drawn into that spell. And I think that the movie should have capitalized more on that. Like just some fabulous cinematography, some really well designed shots, some really great character moments. Like give us more time in the first section of Eileen's obsession growing over time, which ironically is what Saltburn I think does really well.
Hmm.
So, like if we
Yeah.
could smush some of these things together and take some of that artistic vision and apply it into this movie, man, this could have felt incredibly adrenaline inducing because there's that element of danger but also of allure. And I think we get like very very small like wisps of that, but I want this movie to like go all in on that, you know. I think that would have helped.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I I definitely got that from this movie, but it could have been stronger. I think the reason why that portion worked for me, as I mean, it didn't like work super well, but like I was tracking with it. Uh, had a lot to do with the score and the cinematography, because there are these long shots where the camera is just either on Eileen's face, or it's her watching somebody else, namely Rebecca. But I think that the cinematography does a good job of creating that sense of disconnect, and how Eileen is just off on her own, just constantly like watching the world around her but never actually engaging. And so then when Rebecca comes, it's like, oh, wait, this is a new object of affection, this is a new object of desire. And so I feel like the cinematography and the score do a really good job kind of creating that atmosphere and that ambiance. But I think that it could have done more than it does, especially if you're trying to, I don't know, showcase this as a thriller in the thriller genre. I think people might see this and get pretty disappointed, because it doesn't fit into what we normally expect. Though I do think that there are thrilling elements of it. Uh, this is once again one of those times where our genre buckets aren't always the most helpful things in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point actually, is I wonder how I would have received this movie if this was portrayed as a drama, you know? This is
Hmm.
categorized from what I've observed as a thriller slash mystery. There's not a I mean,
Oh,
that's yeah. That's
yeah. There's not a mystery in here.
no. There's not at
Oh,
all.
that's
So I was
interesting.
waiting, like,
Yeah.
okay, we're getting into the story of Lee and his mother, and there's a whole like unraveling that's gonna happen. And with the thread is very short. You know, there's not much to unravel. It is like a small little ribbon that you just you found the end of really quickly. And so and I don't know if it's a thriller really in the ways that we expect from marketing. I don't think this is smart to be portrayed as a thriller. Um,
Hmm.
so, you know, you know, drama, character drama, maybe more fitting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just also interesting to think about our expectations that we come
Mhm.
to a movie with, because I knew nothing about this really before we went and saw this. I knew it had Anne Hathaway in it and Thomas and Mackenzie, and there was something about a prison. That's all of the information that I had about this movie. Uh
Mhm.
and so I do wonder if, because I maybe knew less, I was like, okay, we're gonna see what happens. So I didn't come in thinking it was going to be a thriller or a mystery. I didn't know what this was. And so those the uh the whiff of thrilling elements was enough for me.
See, I broke my rule before watching this movie, and I watched the trailer because I was
Oh,
trying to convince family members to go watch this at the theater. They did not.
gotcha.
Uh, but we
That's
watched the
probably a
trailer
good choice.
together, and let me tell you, the trailer is thrilling. The trailer is very thrilling.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
It and the thing is, like, the
Wow.
trailers, uh, it includes many of the shots that the movie also does include. It's not like sometimes the trailers will include things where you're like, that's just wasn't in the movie, that shot at all.
Mhm.
It includes those shots, but they're positioned very differently. So the example that I'll give is that shot of her at the end of the movie, lit up in red in the forest. and like she's awash in red, right after she disposes of the body, and there's this thrilling music playing over it. And so it conjures up this expectation of like, oh, this is going to be dangerous and brutal, and all the stuff. And that shot at the end is literally like right after she's very calmly disposed of a body after a somewhat thrilling event. But like it is it when you can imagine when you cherry pick some of those shots that seem thrilling and then cut them together, the expectation is that the meat that is behind those bones is also going to be just as thrilling. And it's more like, let's take the sprinkles that are very thrilling and cut them together. And when you have a montage of those, it does give you the feeling of excitement. So I would say the trailer is more thrilling than the movie, for sure.
Wow. Wow. That is impressive.
Yes, it's very smart, I guess. Gets butts and seats in theaters, maybe.
Yeah, but like at what cost though? This is the constant struggle that I have with trailers is sure, you take all these pieces to get people to come to the movie, so you take the most enticing pieces and throw them all in the trailer. But then if you're setting up somebody to go to this movie and the movie itself does not match the trailer, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to leave disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when you leave a review on Letterboxd or Rotten Tomatoes or post about it on social media or talk about it with your friends, it's going to be a negative review.
Yep.
And so you'll get negative press that might turn other people off from seeing it. Is it one of those where you're like, I don't know, taking a short-term gain for like a long-term loss? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It's probably me just overthinking trailers and marketing of movies, but it really frustrates me that they do that instead of just creating a really honest portrayal of what the movie is so that you are attracting the right viewers to go see it.
Wow.
Not
Yep.
everybody would be drawn to this movie, and that's okay because it's not made for everyone.
Yes.
But if you create a trailer that creates false expectations, you're going to turn off a lot more people from it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so true. It's so true. And I wonder if the movie maybe wasn't sure how much it wanted to lean into that aspect of this and like really create a thriller, because the movie seems to um not choose to lean heavily into those aspects when it could have, right? Like there's a lot there that you could play up and dramatize and give it that flair to create those moments of thrill. And the movie kind of doesn't choose to, and seems to be not interested in trying to create a true thriller anyway. So I do wonder, like, what was the original novel like, and what is the experience of reading that novel? I imagine that um, there's perhaps a lot more thriller aspects in the novel. Like the insinuations about
Mm-hmm.
Lee and Rita, and it's in
Yeah.
this like prison for like all of that backdrop seems to set up this idea of something big, dramatic, event happening. And I'm sure that the from that perspective, if we're thinking about marketing, everyone who's read this novel also will go into this movie with certain expectations too. And it was just an interesting
Mm-hmm.
choice for the movie to not lean as heavily into it as it really could have. It could have gone all in on playing up the prison scenes and the drama of being in that environment and kind of the atmosphere of that. And we don't really get to a lot of the story with Lee and Rita until like halfway through the movie, it feels like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it once again goes to the question of what is this movie trying to do and what is this movie trying to be?
Mm.
Because I think the way that it's set up is supposed to be this really interesting character study as you peel back these layers of Eileen and learn who she is, and Rebecca is just kind of a catalyst to get Eileen to open up. Uh,
Mm.
but
Mm-hmm.
there's such a distance from Eileen that even though we learn more about her and we spend a lot of time with her, we still don't get to like fully know her. And so I think that's why the ending is even a little bit disappointing, or it feels like you said unfinished,
Mm.
is because even though we've peeled back some layers of Eileen, we still don't know her. There's still this weird distance there that I don't think lends itself to a deep character study, which is what I think this is trying to be. Um, and so when you don't have those characters and you don't have like a super thrilling
Mm,
story, you're just kind of left with like a neutral movie. And I feel like that's what Eileen ends up being.
mm. That's a fabulous point, which is that this also really isn't doing the character study aspect of it, of the other option to lean into well either. So we're kind of left without the thrill and without the deep, meaningful character study either. And then we're just leaving the theater wondering what we just experienced. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good summation of the whole
Yeah.
experience. Is
Yeah.
you watch this movie and then you leave and you go,
Yeah.
huh?
You're like,
And then
yeah.
you just move about your day.
Yes.
There's not a lot there to think about. It doesn't like haunt you like something like
No.
Saltburn did, you know. It
Yeah.
just it was a an hour and 38 minutes and then you go back to your life, hopefully
Mhm.
not in 1964 Massachusetts.
Yes. Yeah. You actually leave the theater and you're like, thank God we're out of that world. And, you
I'm
know.
saying, like, I have never been more happy to live somewhere where it doesn't snow. Like, this is great.
Oh man. Uh another just quick thought. It's just I remember I left the theater feeling like, oh, I'm surprised this got made, and it's just the type of movie that
Mm-hmm.
I would expect to be released on Netflix, in the top 10 for maybe a day or two and then kind of forgotten as well. And there's enough dollars and funding to get this a theater release. I wonder if like the I haven't read the book, but I wonder if the intention and maybe the following of the book helped push it through all of the like business and revenue projections aspect of this. But I'm kind of just surprised that this movie exists and is a theatrical release. It's kind of unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Also, like the fact that this got a theatrical release and The Killer didn't
Right?
get a theatrical release, like this is wrong.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I this is a fine movie to watch in the theaters. It's fine. But like you don't need to watch it in the theaters. You could watch this at home on
Right.
your couch and
Yes.
have just a good a time.
Hmm.
But The Killer, really? I was
Right.
upset.
To be sucked into that world and the killer would have
Mhm.
been amazing in
So
a
much
theater
better.
experience. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's just unexpected. Just very unexpected.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
I I also found this movie really interesting that it's coming out at this time too. Like,
mm,
sure, it makes sense right before the holidays. This is happening during Christmas time, but it's kind of funny. It reminded me of Saltburn, like you mentioned, and The Holdovers that we reviewed
mm,
like a month ago. And so I just thought that it was so funny that these three movies that are all very different from each other, but have some like weird commonalities between them,
yeah.
are all coming out kind of around the same time. And so as I was watching Eileen, I kept thinking of both The Holdovers and Saltburn and comparing this movie to those. And I think both of them, though I didn't love The Holdovers, I think both The Holdovers and Saltburn do things better than Eileen does, and so I could see what Eileen was trying to do, and I was like, well, I feel like I've experienced a better version of that
Mm,
in the past month, so I think that also kind of works to Eileen's detriment.
no, that is so true. That is so true. And almost the Eileen needs what both Saltburn and the holdovers do well, but in very different ways. Like if we could combine the character study and the atmospheric parts of the holdovers with just kind of the execution and filmmaking and stylistic flair that Saltburn has, like that's what Eileen needs. And I think it's the unfortunate thing is that there is a version of this movie that I believe would be highly effective with the same subject material, the same actor, same subject material, but executed and maybe constructed differently. I think that they've got the talent and they've got the like period atmosphere nailed down well. It's just kind of the meat and potatoes that
Mm-hmm.
is missing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think if this had been maybe paced a little bit differently, and some of the writing was a little bit different. Like, this could be a home run. Like, this
Yeah.
is, I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's an okay movie. And I think it's, I don't know, 70% of the way there. And like just a few changes could have made this a home run.
Hmm.
And that's just, it's a bummer. Like, so much work went into this, and you can tell that like people like poured their hearts into this movie. And so for this not to be as good as it could have been is just, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
I wanted this to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Um, okay. Well, let's include a spoiler here. If you haven't seen Eileen, it is available out in theaters. We recommend checking it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. So, on that same vein, one of the things that I was thinking about, but after the movie ended, that I think could have been an interesting theme, but I don't think the movie takes advantage of like really leaning into it, and maybe the novel does. Is there was this really interesting aspect of this movie where it's primarily centered around the stories of the females, right? We've got Eileen, we've got Rebecca, and we've got Rita. And in a way, I think all three of them are a product of the men in their lives turning rotten in some way and them having to bear the burden and the responsibility to figure out how to manage and how to like what to react to and survive in those situations. And they all do that in very, very different ways. Um, and they, in a way, they have a lot more in common by the end than they do at the beginning, and how they respond and react to the kind of corrupt men in their lives. In some cases, they lean into the power that they have through their sexuality and things like that. In the case of Rebecca, Eileen kind of takes the kind of the approach of being invisible and staying out of the way. And she then, blossoms into learning from the ways of Rebecca and whatnot. And then Rita, in a way, like almost because of the emotional needs that she has, kind of joins forces with this corrupt man and logics out for herself the morality and what she's doing, and she becomes twisted in that way. But I thought there would have been a really interesting theme, and maybe the novel covers this, in the consequences and responsibilities that these women bear from the men in their lives. And I think that there's this really maybe interesting larger theme that the film could explore around that theme and around that topic, that I think could be much more universally like thought about in terms of the gender roles and the ways that women have throughout history had to bear the weight of and manage and deal with the actions and choices of men in their lives, good or bad. And there isn't enough there for like me to really sink my teeth into it, but there is that shot of the three women together in Rita's kitchen or basement, where I was like, wow, like each of these are a product of their environments and the people that have been in their lives.
No, that is such a good point. And it's just a shame that the movie doesn't capitalize on that, because that would have been really fascinating to go a little bit more deeper into these characters. And like, you learn, I mean, you learn so little about all three of them,
So,
but especially
yeah.
like Mrs. Polk, you know next to nothing about her except for her monologue that she gives, which is stunning. Like, holy crap. I was riveted when she's talking while tied up in her basement. Like, that was a great performance, and the way that the camera is just glued to her face, and so you have to stare into her eyeballs as she is relaying this horrific story that she's telling. But that's really all you get to know about her. So I think, again, if this movie wanted to make that point, or wanted to be a deeper character study, or show these three women and what it's like to be a woman in Massachusetts in 1964, it would have to be constructed a little bit different, because it really ends up just being these two women end up assaulting and murdering this other woman who helped enable her husband to assault their
Yeah.
son, who killed Yeah, like it ends up being facts rather than something that points to a larger theme
Yeah.
that you can really chew on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, which then goes back to kind of our earlier point around this movie
Mm,
needed to have leaned in more heavily into the characters. Yeah, because that
yeah.
would have then landed the plane. And I imagine, I would assume that the book has more time to give us like little observations from Eileen's perspective about Mrs. Polk as she comes to visit, and slowly we would have formed some like hazy image of who this woman is, what their story is, and there's kind of a better slow drip that we get along the way, so that by the time we land at this climactic ending, we've been along that journey. Whereas Sophie, we get like one scene with her coming to visit her son, and then immediately that whole plot line is like the whole takes over the whole rest of the movie. And I'm like, we don't know anything about these people. It was one visit.
Hmm. And I could see how the movie was trying to do that, because Eileen's dad mentions the case, then Eileen gets the file out of the file room, and then Rebecca takes the file, and then she calls the mom in. So like I feel like the movie was trying to do that and trying to create intrigue around this case and intrigue around this woman, but like you said, it just doesn't do it well enough. And so it feels like it's kind of coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Uh it's again, I could see what they were trying to do. They just didn't quite nail it.
Yeah. 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 This is one of those movies that makes you just want to read the original book and just compare notes,
Yes.
Figure out like,
Yeah.
what was the original intent of the story, and then how did this get translated in a funky way?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, other aspects of this movie that we wanted to touch on.
I think another aspect of this that made me keep like wanting to watch and had a little bit of that like thrillery vibe to it is from the very beginning I was like, oh, Eileen's gonna murder somebody. Who is she going to murder? And so that was just a fun guessing game that I was playing while watching this movie. And so it was like in conversations with her dad. And I was like, oh, okay, dad is at the top of the list. This is great. Then she gets a gun. And I was like, oh, there's the murder weapon.
Yeah.
Okay. It was like a game of Clue, basically, is what I was playing while watching Eileen. And so I was like, okay, Eileen with the gun in the conservatory,
Yeah.
it was great. Um, and so I think that again, like those elements maybe could have been played up a little bit more to
Hmm.
make it into something thrilling, rather than just like a personal game of Clue.
You made this an interactive activity. I am so proud of
I
you.
did.
That is
I did.
that is a feat. Yeah. This is a let's try and solve the mystery, but plot twist, there is no mystery.
Hmm.
Well,
Yes,
there is. There
that
is. She
that
does
is
end up
exactly
they
what it
do
was.
end up killing someone, so
They do. They do. Which was an
that's good.
interesting choice.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay, this rando. We're going to kill a random person. This is cool.
Yeah.
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 Had to make it into a game.
I mean, we needed something to sink your teeth into with this movie.
It's very
And
true.
you chose that, I chose cigarettes, Like we found our things. Our survival techniques. Wasn't there a recent movie where we were also just like fixated on something to just try and make it fun? We both chose different things. I don't remember which one it was, but
I'm sure, because
this is
I
what we
know that
do.
I'm always fixating on random crap,
This is
so
what we do.
that makes sense.
Okay, you mentioned the score, and I'm curious your thoughts about the score because the score didn't work for me, but it sounded like it did work for you. So I'm intrigued to hear more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it was effective for me in just creating that atmosphere,
Mm.
and I appreciated how sometimes it would just cut to silence too. I think it's those moments of silence that always really catch my attention. And so I think that the film was pretty good about when to lay it on and when to have your score just blaring at you and then when to just cut to silence and make you actually like really pay attention to what was going on. So I think it was a good atmosphere setter for me.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, interesting. I think a lot of the choices of the score I thought were like musically. very fascinating. Um, Different from, I think, the traditional ways that, we've often seen thrillers are scored, which can get really generic and really vanilla real fast. Watch any Netflix though, and they all kind of sound similar with the strings. Um, there were certain moments where I found the score distracting, and I felt like the mood didn't fit musically what I was hearing. So the one of the moments that this really, I think, didn't work for me is, I think, when Eileen is cleaning up essentially after all of the she gets back after they've killed Rita. She's grabbing all of the things from her. She's grabbing her money. She's grabbing her fur coat, back in the home. And I don't know, the score is just really loud and really dissonant from the mood that I would expect it. And usually I don't notice the score so explicitly unless it's being done very well and adding to the overall atmosphere, and you're like, wow, this is just, it's all coming together so well. That was an instant where I was like, whoa, hey there, score. I see you. I hear you. I don't know what you're doing, but your presence is known. And that's usually not a good sign for me. So there were a couple moments where I was like, it's an interesting choice. Unique, creative, different from what I would have expected, but didn't quite work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I think for me, some of that disconnect and dissonance was interesting.
Mm.
And I think that helped, again, like create that sense of like intrigue that I had, and like, okay, I'm willing to keep going with this, you know? And so it's these little moments that didn't quite work together that made me want to keep going. So it's like the Banshees of Inisherin
I was
all
just
over
thinking
again,
that,
where
yeah.
I I didn't understand, so I wanted to keep going and try and solve the puzzle,
Yep.
as I do.
Yep. This character makes no sense to me. Let me lean in because it does not
Yeah.
compute.
Yes.
Yeah.
I must find the answer.
Once again, this is now an interactive activity because we love those out here.
Yes. Have to make it interactive. Because
Yes.
otherwise, like, what are we doing?
Yes.
Have to turn it into a game, have to make it into a puzzle, something. Got to keep going.
Oh, man. Let's see. Other things that we wanted to mention with this movie. What else stood out to you?
I have watched too many cop shows, is the problem. And the whole time, not the whole time, the last 30 minutes of the movie, I was sitting here thinking, it would have been so easy to commit a crime in the 1960s. Are you kidding me? Y'all are just like leaving fingerprints all over the place willy-nilly. You're firing guns at people. Like, how did the neighbors not hear that and call the cops on you? Like, there were just multiple moments where I was like, this would never fly today. You would have to be such a more intelligent criminal to get away with murder like that today than you could have in the 1960s. So these ladies are really lucky that they were in Massachusetts in 1964, because this would not fly in 2023. No, CSI would catch you
real fast. Real
fast. You would be locked up so quick.
Yeah.
They're not good criminals.
I did have that thought when she, like she disposes, quote unquote, disposes of the body, and I'm
so
like,
badly.
They're gonna know that there's drugs in her system and she didn't die from like the car exhaust and smoke seeping through in the middle of the forest. And also she's got a gunshot wound in her like left shoulder. Like these details are not gonna come together for an easy like, oh, she committed suicide in the middle of the forest from her car. This does not compute.
And the car, I mean, unless Eileen stole Mrs. Polk's car, but that's not what happened. The car is registered to Eileen's dad. So, like, I mean, presume they had car registrations in 1964. Like, this, it was so frustrating. I was like, I appreciate that you're trying to put together a plan, but your plan sucks. And throughout the movie, we have established that the police respond to calls.
Yeah.
So when her dad is shooting off his gun, the police show up because the neighbors heard it and they called. And so, I mean, maybe Mrs. Polk lives in a rougher neighborhood. I
Hmm.
don't know. Maybe it's a magical soundproof basement. I don't know. But it just, those details did not add up to me because I
Yep.
was like, the police are very responsive in this small town. Why aren't they responsive at this point in time? But it's fine. We were on the downward stretch of the movie. We just had to let it happen,
Yep.
even though it didn't make sense.
Yep. One of those moments where you're like, okay, we're nearing the end. I see
Hmm.
the light at the end of the tunnel. Just
Yes,
accept.
just gotta land it.
Yes.
Gotta land the plane.
Yeah. No, there's fingerprints all over that home. What? What do they expect? There's probably blood everywhere too.
Right?
Hello?
Hello. Yeah, blood all over Eileen's hands, Rebecca's hands, wherever
Yes.
she ended up. Like,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yep.
I guess Mrs. Polk like didn't have like a nosy neighbor because I feel like here's the thing:
Hmm.
if your son has brutally murdered your husband and you're still living in the same house where all that happened, aren't people going to like be around the house and like want to take pictures of you and have like that intrigue, and you would have like the nosy neighbors who are always like looking, and I don't know. I feel like this house would have more attention on it. So this doesn't seem like a plausible place for all of this to happen. But it is Massachusetts in the dead of
Yes.
winter, and people probably want to be inside their own homes.
Yeah, they're like, just leave me alone, let me be warm. Although,
Yeah.
what I'm gathering from this is that note to self, if you're moving, choose the nosy neighbors. I know it's kind of annoying, but in moments like this, could be the thing that saves you. So, there's a
Yeah.
plus. There's a plus.
Yeah.
Safety measures. The best security system is your nosy neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they can be a helpful security system.
Yeah.
They're looking out for you.
Yes, they've got your back when crazed females come for you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I did think it was like maybe implied, but interestingly implied, but not explicitly communicated, which is there's an obsession that Rebecca seems to have with uh, seeking justice for the situation with Lee and Polk, because there's something like personal about this situation that she is going out of her way to go and investigate. I don't think this is in her normal protocol as a prison psychologist to be showing up at one of your clients' mother's home and tying her up and trying to get the confession out of her in her personal home, and so it was there seems to be some sort of trauma or personal experience or some emotional connection that Rebecca has to the situation that I thought was like really interestingly done, where it's implied but not that we don't get that much more about that whole storyline. But based on the decisions that she makes, it seems to point to like there's a lot more to Rebecca's story that we still don't even know by the end of the movie, which I thought that was well done, and perhaps maybe where the novel shines and in those nuances that the movie kind of starts to imply but doesn't go fully yet. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's one area where I wanted more because I didn't understand any of the choices. I I think that was one of those where I was like, this doesn't make sense for what I've gathered about you as a character. Um, so I don't know. I think I wish that that had been a little bit more clear
Mm,
so that we understood her motivations, because it seemed like such a random choice to me. Like she hyperfixates on this one case
yeah.
and has one meeting with the mother and then resorts to assaulting the mother in her own home and tying her up to try and get a confession out of her. Like, I don't know, that is a big leap for me, and I wish that there had been a few more like red flags about her throughout, so that conclusion made more sense to me. That just, it felt not
Out
consistent
of
with this
nowhere.
character.
Yeah. Yeah. because it is totally out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was like, where did this come from?
Yep. Yeah, no, that I didn't get it either, so I filled in the blanks. It was like, surely
I
this
love
must
it.
be why. But you're right. It, like,
Yes.
had there been maybe a little bit more, those moments would have also landed better because we're like, oh yes, like we understand Rebecca. We understand the connection, emotional connection points that she also has with Eileen because they can share and they understand each other in that, in the ways that they've experienced similar things. And that's because the other thing that I didn't really see enough of is just like the connection between the two of them. I think it's like there's a lot implied there. Um, but I didn't really buy it, to be honest. There's a movie, I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Carol. And the whole time I was watching this movie, it's Rudy Mara and Kate Blanchett, and they're in nearly similar archetypes in these characters, like shy, very reserved, very quiet, like caterpillar that hasn't turned into a butterfly character, which Rooney Mara plays, and like also got the dark brown hair and like doe eyes. And Kate Blanchett then plays this like older woman who is incredibly sophisticated and well cultured and has this confidence and this charisma. And there's a relationship that's formed between the two of them over the course of the movie. So the whole time I'm also watching this movie, I'm just imagining Rooney Mara and Kate Blanchett playing these two characters as well and seeing what that would feel like and look like as in this movie. But they in Carol, the connection between the two of them is so clear and you buy into the emotional bonds that are formed there. I didn't really buy it with Eileen and Rebecca. What about you?
Yeah, I viewed Eileen as somebody who is obsessed with Rebecca. And then I viewed Rebecca as somebody who is really good at identifying people who are weaker and then using them to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I I don't know that I necessarily saw like a bond between them, but I saw how they were both attracted to one another, uh, both in like very dysfunctional ways, and how I especially could see how Rebecca could use Eileen to whatever ends she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But then the movie doesn't really seem to even go there. And so I really struggled with Rebecca because like everything that I thought about her, the movie doesn't fully go there. And so I was kind of left with like, okay, I don't get the point of view as a character unless you are supposed to be this like guide that gets Eileen out of her shell. But then, like we talked about before, I don't think that the movie fully capitalizes on that either. So I don't know. I saw things in both of the characters, but I don't think that the movie fully goes there the way that it could have to make those things I don't know, interact as much as it could have.
Mm. We're like, can we take these two chemicals and have them just mix together more fully and react
Yeah.
and collide with each other? Yeah,
Yeah.
they still stay a little separate.
Which and like that can be interesting too, but again, like it's I don't know, this film creates a distance between us and the characters and between the characters themselves,
Mm.
but doesn't I don't know, doesn't fully capitalize on that distance in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
So I think again, like this movie has good elements and is doing good things, but just doesn't fully commit to it. And so you're just kind of left with everything is kind of mediocre.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's almost like the if the movie could paint with brighter colors and just not literally,
Yeah.
brighter colors, but more saturated. There's more of everything, slightly more intensified. Uh, would have been what we're looking for. Yeah, it's almost like we just need more salt. Like just it was a bland
Yeah.
bland meal, a little bit of a bland meal.
Honestly, that's a great metaphor. That is exactly what it is
Yeah.
cuz you can see the spices and you can like taste the whiffs of all of these
I
little
wish.
things, but it's just not enough. And so you need the salt to amplify the flavors
Yes.
that are already there. That's
Yes.
exactly what this movie needs. We need more
Mhm.
salt.
More salt, people.
It's
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. That's kind of the I mean, if I were a filmmaker, that'd be the worst critique that I would probably receive is just they're like, you just
Yeah.
didn't nope. Like it just wasn't it. It wasn't there, the meat wasn't there, and the intensity wasn't there. You know, I'd rather create a
Yeah.
film that is more along the lines of Saltburn, like polarizing, but like people have opinions and they're talking about it. You know, this is kind of the worst reaction that I would want from a movie if I were creating one.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot to talk about with this,
Yeah.
which is a shame
Yeah.
because again, like I imagine that the novel is chock full of stuff.
Yep.
Uh but the movie doesn't capitalize on it. It needs more salt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I if I had infinite time, would just want to like go and read the novel and just compare, you know, because it's I think I had the same feeling after watching Cherry, the Tom Holland movie as well, because
Mm-hmm.
the movie clearly points to evidence of something that has a lot of really interesting ideas. You know, like there's something there, just we're missing part of the picture. So I'm just like, I want to finish the picture. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's notoriously a challenge to take a book and adapt it for the big screen. And I think this is yet another data point on that pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it's rough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, all right. Anything else that we wanted to hit on, touch on with this movie? Did we hit it all?
Uh no, I have two other things. One is a serious point and then one is a silly point.
Okay.
So my serious point is I really appreciate how the film introduced us to Rebecca. Um, we spend a lot of time in gray, mundane, boring, muted Massachusetts in the winter, and like we
Mm,
feel the lethargy and the stuckness that Eileen has. And even like visually, it's all gray, it's all muted. And then you see Rebecca come in her red convertible
yeah.
car, and she's wearing bright reds and bright colors and has this bright blonde hair. You know, she is just this
Mm-hmm.
breath of fresh air visually. And then Anne Hathaway gives a good performance too as Rebecca.
Yep.
And so I just really loved how the film visually sets us up so we're like, oh, thank God some color has come into our lives. And I think that that was a really effective way of introducing that character. So I loved that. I thought that that was really, really excellent.
I mean, talk about having like immediate empathy with Eileen. I'm like, I too am
Oh my
like drawn to
gosh.
Rebecca. I'm like, oh
Yes.
yes, thank goodness, something exciting and there's like a confidence also. I think that Rebecca immediately just exudes and a power that she commands in a room full of men and that I think that is also alluring to Eileen as well. Of just this in a way, this is a coming of age story, you know, of a girl learning to self actualize and embrace parts of her autonomy and her decision making that has been so suffocated by her circumstances for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And Rebecca does a really great job of just,
Drawing
ooh,
that out.
breath of fresh air. Something new is going on.
Uh-huh.
Let's see what she's up to.
Yep.
Because surely that is more interesting than anything else happening in this town.
Yep. Yep. Indeed. Okay, what's your silly thing?
My silly thing is that Harvard people love to tell you that they went to Harvard. And there are multiple times throughout this movie where Rebecca just drops Harvard in there. And I was like, you very clearly went to Harvard because that is absolutely a trait. And so I love that the movie included that.
Yes.
I thought that was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the They'll make sure you know in all of the
Mhm.
ways. All of the ways.
Yep. You got to know. She did not go to some other school. She went to Harvard. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I know that this movie is getting praised pretty heavily for just nailing the like period atmosphere of 1964 New England and the people and the dynamics here. And so um I am not from that era, but I did grow up in the Northeast, and a lot of the like the visuals and the color palettes, all of that, I think they landed really well. So that's pretty fascinating. There's a lot more praise for this
Yeah.
film that I'm agreeing with though, which I think is also pretty interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. People seem to be really liking this, from what I've read.
Oh,
So fascinating. We must have watched a different
wow.
movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of the reviews that I have read have been like middling.
Mm,
And so I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm on the right track." That's fascinating that a
yeah.
lot of people are really enjoying this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm,
Mostly praising
cool.
the performances and the period atmosphere, being just incredibly
Oh,
accurate, and also
okay.
like the adherence to the original text. They're also praising. So all those things are probably the movie's strengths. So they're picking the right things, but there's just
Mhm.
a lot else that's missing that we want.
Yes. Yeah, we want a good whole experience, not
Exactly.
just good individual parts.
Indeed. Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes our review and discussion for Eileen. You can find it available out in theaters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. Everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about Eileen. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at MoviesAndUsPod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the film Maestro. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you very soon.